Imagine a world in which we are being hypnotized. Hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, government officials, and educators. It sounds familiar, right? Well, it should, because it is the plot of the 1988 film by John Carpenter entitled They Live. You remember the one, right? Where the guy finds a pair of glasses that allow him to see past the programming of society. These glasses allow him to see the world for what it really is. These glasses reveal a deeper level of society that go unnoticed by the general public. A hidden level that is being controlled by evil aliens, who use all aspects of modern society to keep humanity brainwashed and mind-controlled, unable to think for themselves and unable to see reality for what it really is. These aliens look like people, they talk like people, they sound like people, and, well, guess what? We can't tell the difference between them and regular people. Now, contrary to popular belief, They Live is not a documentary, but it is based on something, and I have that something right here. This is the November 1963 edition of the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and tucked away deep inside this book on page 73 is what the movie's based on. 8 O'Clock in the Morning by Ray Nelson. At the end of the show, the hypnotist told his subjects, "Awake!" Something unusual happened. One of the subjects awoke all the way. This has never happened before. His name was George Nada, and he blinked out the sea of faces in the theater. At first unaware of anything out of the ordinary, then he noticed. He spotted, there, in the crowd, non-human faces. The faces of the Fascinators. They had been here all along, of course, but only George was awake. So only George recognized them for what they really were. He understood everything in a flash, including the fact that if he were to give any outward sign, the Fascinators would instantly command him to return to his former state, and he would obey. He left the theater pushing out into the neon light, carefully avoiding giving any indication that he saw the green reptilian flesh or the multiple yellow eyes of the rulers of the earth. One of them asked him, "Got a light, buddy?" George gave him a light and then moved on. At intervals along the street, George saw the posters hanging with photographs of the Fascinators. Multiple eyes and various commands printed under them, such as work 8 hours, play 8 hours, sleep 8 hours, and marry and reproduce. A TV set in the window of the store caught George's eye, but he looked away in the nick of time. When he didn't look at the Fascinator in the screen, he could resist the command, "Stay tuned to this station." George lived alone in a little sleeping room, and as soon as he got home, the first thing he did was disconnect the TV set. In other rooms, he could hear the TV sets of his neighbors, though most of the time, the voices were human. But now and again, he heard the arrogant, strangely bird-like croaks of the aliens. "Obey the government," said one croak. "We are the government," said another. "We are your friends. You'd do anything for a friend, wouldn't you?" Obey, work. Suddenly the phone rang. George picked it up. It was one of the Fascinators. "Hello," it squawked. "This is your control chief of police, Robertson." "You are an old man, George Nada. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock your heart will stop. Please repeat." "I am an old man," said George. "Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock my heart will stop." The control hung up. "No, it won't," whispered George. He wondered why they wanted him dead. Did they suspect he was awake? Probably. Someone might have spotted him, noticed that he didn't respond the way the others did. If George were alive at one moment after 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, then they would be sure. No use waiting here for the end, he thought. He went out again. The posters, the TV, the occasional commands from passing aliens did not seem to have absolute power over him, though he still felt strongly tempted to obey. He passed an alley and stopped. One of the aliens was alone there, leaning up against the wall. George walked up to him. "Move on," grumbled the thing, focusing his deadly eyes on George. George felt the grasp of awareness waver. For a moment, the reptilian head dissolved into the face of a lovable old drunk. Of course, the drunk would be lovable. George picked up a brick and smashed it down on the old drunk's head with all of his strength. For a moment, the image blurred and the blue-green blood oozed out of the face and the lizard fell, twitching and writhing. After a moment, it was dead. George dragged the body into the shadows and searched it. There was a tiny radio in his pocket and a curiously shaped knife and a fork in another. The tiny radio said something in an incomprehensible language. George put it down beside the body, but kept the eating utensils. I can't possibly escape, thought George. Why fight them? But maybe he could. What if he could awaken others? That might be worth a try. He walked 12 blocks to the apartment of his girlfriend, Lil, and he knocked on the door. She came to the door in her bathrobe. I want you to wake up, he said. I'm awake, she said. Come on in. He went in. The TV was playing. He turned it off. No, he said. I mean, really wake up. She looked at him without comprehension. So he snapped his fingers and shouted, Wake up! The masters command you to wake up. Are you off your rocker, George? She asked. You sure are acting funny. He slapped her face. Cut that out. She cried. What the hell are you up to anyway? Nothing, George said, defeated. I was just kidding around. Slapping my face wasn't just kidding around, she cried. There was a knock at the door. George opened it. One of the aliens was there. Can you keep the noise down to a dull roar? It said. The eyes and reptilian flesh faded a little bit, and George saw the flickering image of a fat middle-aged man in a sleeveless shirt. It was still a man when George slashed his throat with the eating knife, but it was an alien before it hit the floor. He dragged it to the apartment and kicked the door shut. What do you see here? He asked Lil, pointing to the many-eyed snake thing on the floor. Mr. Coney, she whispered, her eyes wide with horror. You just killed him, like it was nothing at all. Don't scream, George warned, advancing on her. I won't, George, I swear I won't, please. For the love of God, put down that knife. She backed away until she had her shoulder blades pressed against the wall. George saw that it was no use. I'm going to tie you up, said George. First, tell me which room Mr. Coney lived in. The first door on your left as you go down the stairs, she said. He tied her up with the bedsheets and gagged her, and then searched the body of the Fascinator. There was another one of those little radios that had talked a foreign language, and another set of eating utensils and nothing else. George went to the next door, and when he knocked, one of the snake things answered. Who is it? Friend of Mr. Coney. I want to see him, said George. He went out for a second. He'll be right back. The door cracked open and 4 yellow eyes popped out. You want to come in and wait? Okay, said George, not looking at his eyes. Are you alone here? He asked as it closed the door. Yeah, why? He slit the throat from behind and searched the apartment. He found human bones, skulls, and a half-eaten hand. He found tanks with huge fat slugs floating in them. The children, he thought, and killed all of the slugs. There were guns, too, of a sort he had never seen before. He discharged one by accident, but fortunately it was noiseless. It seemed to fire a little poison dart. He pocketed the gun and as many boxes of darts as he can, and he went back to Lil's place. When she saw him, she writhed in helpless terror. Relax, honey, he said, opening her purse. I wanted to just borrow your car keys. He took the keys and went downstairs to the street. Her car was parked in the same general area in which she always parked it. He recognized it by the dent in the right fender. He got in, started it, and began driving aimlessly. He drove for hours, thinking desperately, searching for some way out. He turned on the radios to see if he could get some sort of music, but there was nothing but news, and it was all about him. George Nada, the homicidal maniac, the announcer, was one of the masters, but he sounded a little bit scared. Why should he be? What can one man do? George wasn't surprised when he saw the roadblock and turned off a side street before he reached it. No little trip to the country for you, Georgie boy, he thought to himself. They had just discovered what he had done back at Lil's place, so they'd probably be looking for Lil's car. He parked it in an alleyway and took the subway. There were no aliens on the subway, for some reason. Maybe they were too good for such things, or maybe it was just because it was so late at night. When one finally did get on, George got off. He went up to the street and went into a bar. One of the Fascinators was on TV saying over and over again, "We are your friends. We are your friends. We are your friends." The stupid lizard sounded scared. Why? What could one man do against all of them? George ordered a beer. Then it hit him. The Fascinators on the TV no longer seemed to have any power over him. He looked at him again and thought, it has to believe it can master me to do it. The slightest hint of fear on his part, and the power to hypnotize is lost. They flashed George's picture on the TV screen, and George retreated to the phone booth. He called the police. "Hello? Robinson?" he asked. "Speaking. This is George Nada. I've figured out how to wake people up." "What?" "George, hang on. Where are you?" Robinson sounded almost hysterical. He hung up and paid and left the bar. They would probably trace his call, he thought. He caught another subway and went downtown. It was dawn when he entered the building of the biggest of the city's TV studios. He consulted the building directory and went up to the elevator. The cop in front of the studio entrance recognized him. "Why, you're Nada," he gasped. George didn't like to shoot him with the poison dart gun, but he had to. There were a lot of police sirens outside, excited shouts, and running footsteps on the stairs. The alien was sitting before the TV camera saying, "We are your friends, we are your friends, we are your friends." And he didn't see George come in. When George shot him with the needle gun, he simply stopped mid-sentence and sat there dead. George stood near him and said something. Imitating the alien croak, "Wake up, wake up. See us as we are." It was George's voice the city heard that morning, but it was the Fascinator's image. And the city did awake for the very first time, and the war began. George did not live to see the victory that finally came. He died of a heart attack at exactly 8 o'clock that morning. So that was the story. Pretty creepy, right? I want to know what you think about it. And I also want to thank you for watching this video. And until next time, God bless you all.